Tonight, we will not speak of thunderbolts or oracles. There will be no epic quests, no clashing bronze, no gods flinging mortals into chaos. Instead, we will wander down a narrow olive path. Just as the light fades. And enter a small Greek home, just after sunset. You will not be asked to remember names or dates. You won't need to solve riddles, or trace bloodlines. You're simply invited to listen. To small rituals, almost forgotten. Things the Greeks did when the sun dipped below the sea. Routines that were not glamorous, not epic. But sacred, still. A soft flicker of flame. A bowl of water placed at the door. A whisper, to Hestia, to Hermes, to no one at all. Tonight, we explore the moments after the myth. When the heroes were asleep. And the farmers, the potters, the midwives, and the children performed quiet acts that connected them to the gods. So, close your eyes. Let your breath slow. And follow me into the darkening hush of ancient Greece. The ancient Greeks did not see sunset as just a pretty sky. They saw it as a threshold. A slow turning of the key between two realms. The world of men, and the world of spirits. When the last golden light brushed the hills of Attica. When the sheep had been herded back, and the market stalls closed. Something subtle, but powerful, began. They called this hour Hesperos. A sacred dusk. The hour of change. Inside the home, the first thing lit was not a candle. But a clay oil lamp, shaped like a shell or a sandal, or an eye. Filled with olive oil pressed that very week. And a tiny linen wick, dipped once in honeyed wine. Lighting this lamp was the first ritual. But it was not rushed. No one snapped their fingers and called for light. Instead, a girl, usually the youngest daughter, would kneel near the hearth. And whisper. Hestia, keeper of flame, keep us warm through the night. She would strike flint, breathe gently on the spark. And the little lamp would flicker to life. Then, slowly, she would light the others. One for the kitchen, where herbs hung drying. One for the courtyard, to keep out wandering spirits. And one for the threshold, a place where gods and ghosts might linger. But light was not enough. It had to be watched. The mother of the house would sit by the hearth, and stare at the flame. Not because she was bored. But because she was guarding it. The Greeks believed the flame had a spirit. A presence. If left alone, it might grow sad, or angry, or vanish. So the family took turns, silently, watching the flame. Each breath, each flicker, told them something. Was the flame tall and strong? Good luck. Was it low and sputtering? Something bad was near. Did it suddenly go out? A warning. Outside, on the doorstep, another ritual began. A small bowl of pure water was placed at the threshold. Not for washing, but for purity. Anyone who entered after sunset had to dip their fingers. And touch their brow, their chest. To wash away the world before entering sacred night. This bowl was often replaced just before dusk. Some families added sprigs of thyme or mint. To sweeten the spirit air, and then, the garlic was placed. Not eaten. Not cooked. Just, placed. Near the door. Near the window. Sometimes even under the bed. Why? Because spirits hate garlic. Or so they believed. Especially the wandering souls called suchai. The restless dead, who walked at twilight, searching for open homes, open dreams. Garlic kept them out. Sometimes figs were offered too. Or a slice of barley bread, left on a flat stone just outside the gate. Not for the gods. Not for the living. But for the shades, the invisible guests. You didn't want to offend them. Let's walk back inside. The lamps are now glowing. Shadows dance on clay walls. And the family has gathered in a semicircle around the hearth. There is no singing. No feasting. This is the hour of quiet. Called Hisukia. No one speaks above a whisper. Children are taught not to laugh during this hour. Why? Because this is when Hermes walks the roads. Not Hermes the messenger. But Hermes Psychopompus, the sole guide. And if he hears too much noise, he might think someone is ready to go with him. So families whisper. They sit. They comb hair. They offer wine, not to drink, but to splash onto the ground. To the dead, they murmur. To those who came before. Even storytelling was sacred. Fathers would recite short myths, not the epics, but the little ones. Did you know, child, he might whisper, that Artemis once shot a silver arrow through a ghost? Not to kill it, just to remind it to leave the living alone. Or, when the moon is red, it means Hecate has passed by. That's why we light the lamp outside, so she doesn't stop at our door. These myths weren't dramatic. They were lullabies in disguise. Each word, each name, each flicker of the lamp was a thread woven into night protection. Sometimes, a mirror was turned face down. Not because of vanity, but because mirrors could trap souls. At night, when light was weak, it was said that reflections could wander. So to be safe, the mirror was covered. Or flipped. Or put in a basket of salt. Salt, too, was sacred. It was rubbed along the doorway. Sprinkled around baby cradles. Mixed into wine left out for spirits. No one touched it after dusk. It belonged to the night. Some homes kept a tiny statue of Hecate near the gate. Not a fearsome one, just a small, clay woman holding 2 torches. At sunset, one of the torches was traced in ash. The other in honey. Why? Because Hecate was believed to guide both the lost and the wise. One path for each. By honoring both, the family stayed balanced. No one wanted too much wisdom. And no one wanted to be followed by the lost. In the final minutes before full darkness, the door was shut. Bolted. A woven charm, made of reeds and red thread, was hung on the handle. Then came the final words. Whispered, softly. Come no farther. We are not yours. We honor the night. But belong to the dawn. And with that, the Greek household passed into its nighttime stillness. Not afraid of darkness. But respectful. And held by ritual. Not all Greeks went quietly into the night. Some followed torchlight deeper into shadow. Not in fear. But in search of something sacred. Something hidden. Because while the household lit its lamps for protection, others lit them for revelation. There were places in ancient Greece. Caves, groves, quiet courtyards behind temples. Where mystery rites were held. And only those who had been initiated could attend. These rites began after sunset. Always. Because sunlight, they believed, was too revealing. It exposed the skin, but not the soul. And the gods they worshipped in these rites. They did not want offerings. They wanted silence. Stillness. And shadows. The most famous of these rituals were the Eleusinian mysteries. Held in honor of Demeter and Persephone. But, what truly happened in those midnight gatherings? We are not entirely sure. Because the participants swore secrecy. On their lives. And for the most part, they kept their word. But the fragments we do have are strange. Soft. And deeply human. Let's begin at the gates of Eleusis. It is late evening. The sky is lavender, streaked with burnt orange. Thousands of people walk barefoot along the sacred way, a road from Athens to the sanctuary. They carry torches, lit from a flame kept hidden in a stone chamber. These flames are not practical. They are symbols of descent and return, of the journey from ignorance to knowledge, from surface to seed, from death to something else. Because the story behind these mysteries is a story of loss. Demeter, goddess of grain, lost her daughter, Persephone, to the underworld. For 9 nights, she wandered, torch in hand, refusing to eat, refusing to rest, refusing to grow a single grain. And so, the people reenacted this search. Walking in the dark, carrying fire, saying nothing. It was believed that to relive Demeter's grief was to understand the seasons of the soul. Upon reaching the sanctuary, the initiates bathed in silence, then changed into plain white tunics. No gold, no sandals, no names. Because identity was suspended. You were not noble or poor, male or female, slave or citizen. You were simply a seeker. At midnight, they entered the inner chamber. It was called the Telesterion. A hall of columns, stone seats, and shadows. Inside, a sacred fire burned. But dimly. A priestess would speak softly of Persephone's return. Of seeds buried and reborn. Of the body dying. And the soul learning how to rise. They were not told to believe. They were told to feel. And many wept. Not from fear, but from recognition that something in them had also been lost, and might still return. Elsewhere in Greece, other cults performed similar rites. Secret. Sacred. Always, after sunset. In rural valleys, women would gather for Thesmophoria, a fertility festival that began at dusk and lasted 3 nights. On the first night, they mourned, wailing softly for Persephone, eating only pomegranate seeds, smearing their arms with ash. On the second night, they fasted, and sat in silence. This was called Nestia, the night of emptying. They believed the body must become hollow before the spirit could be filled. Then, on the third night, they danced. Not wildly, but gently, barefoot on packed earth, circling the fire, arms outstretched, eyes half closed. They did not sing hymns. They hummed low, wordless notes, meant to mimic the hum of bees. Why bees? Because bees were sacred to Persephone, creatures of the dark, makers of gold, keepers of secret chambers. There was another goddess honored after sunset. Hecate. She was not feared in these rites. She was invited. Through torches and smoke. Every month, on the dark moon, when the sky held no light, offerings were left at crossroads. Not temples. Not altars. But simple 3-way paths, where Hecate was believed to stand, between realms. The offerings were strange. Fish bones. Shortcake honey cakes. Raw onions. Fire and a smear of ash. Placed carefully, never spoken of aloud. Then the worshipper walked away, without looking back. Because to look back was to invite her attention. And Hecate's attention was not something one could predict. One older ritual, nearly forgotten, involved the use of poppies. In some villages, especially in Arcadia, tiny red poppies were ground and mixed with warm wine. This was offered to Hypnos, the god of sleep. But not drunk. Instead, the cup was poured at the base of a laurel tree. And a small incantation whispered, "Let us not dream of death tonight. Let our minds be folded in gentleness. Let us fall, and rise, and forget. Evening prayers were often spoken with eyes closed. To focus less on form, and more on feeling. Even children had their own rituals. Before bed, a child might be handed a small token. A carved stone. A string of 3 knots. Or a doll with no face. Each had meaning. The knots represented promises made that day. The faceless doll protected against envy spirits, those who, it was said, could see beauty and try to steal it. The carved stone. It was called a cyclone, a sleeping charm. They were smoothed by river water, warmed by the fire, then placed under the child's hand. Parents told them, "This stone remembers dreams. Give it yours." And the child would sleep, believing the stone would keep the nightmares. And let the good dreams pass. Back in Eleusis, as the final hours of night wore thin, the torches were extinguished. One by one. In reverse order of how they were lit. This, too, was symbolic. Because to enter the mystery was only part of the journey. To leave it, and return to morning with its lessons, was just as sacred. As they left the sanctuary, many participants carried a grain of barley wrapped in a scrap of cloth. Not to eat, but to bury. Somewhere quiet. Alone. It was said that where you buried your barley, you would one day return, in spirit. And so, in the quietest, darkest corners of Greece, while the cities slept, others walked in silence, carrying flame, pouring wine, honoring grief, joy, sleep, and return. Not loudly, not for spectacle, but softly, in rhythm with the night. And in doing so, they reminded themselves that even in darkness, there is memory, there is meaning, there is myth. The deeper the night grew in ancient Greece, the stranger it became. You see, dusk had its rituals. Midnight had its mysteries. But the hours just before dawn, that's when the line between myth and superstition blurred into something fragile. This was not the time of gods, nor of priests. It was the time of old women, of folk charms, of quiet omens too small for temple scrolls, but too powerful to ignore. We begin with something humble. A bowl of water, placed under the bed. It was called hydromantia, dream-watching water. Before sleep, a person would gaze into the still surface, and whisper the name of someone they missed. A mother, a lost friend, a child who had not come home. Then they would sleep. And if the water rippled by morning, it meant that person had visited them in a dream, even if they didn't remember it. Some Greeks left coins at the bottom of the bowl. One for Hypnos, god of sleep. One for Morpheus, bringer of dreams. And one, just in case, for Sharon. In case the visitor came from far, far across the river. Other omens were more domestic. They believed a cat grooming its ears at night meant a visitor was coming. If the flame of the lamp bent toward the door, it meant the dead were curious. If you sneezed once before bed, it meant someone had just spoken your name in another city. Small things. Soft signs. The kind that made one stop, and whisper a short phrase. Oi soi agathon. Let it be for good. Some people refused to sleep facing a door. Others made sure the soles of their feet were not pointing toward the window. Why? Because dreams, they said, always leave through the feet. And if the window is open, the soul might not come back in. In some villages, women stitched 3 knots into the inside hem of their husband's tunic before bed. It was not a love charm. It was a containment spell. To keep his thoughts from wandering. To keep the old gods from whispering in his dreams. Because men often dreamed of things that should not be remembered. Let us enter now, the woman's quarters. A place where olive oil jars line the wall. A clay comb rests beside a wooden doll. A mirror lies face down. In this room, a mother prepares her daughters for sleep. But not with lullabies. With layered protections. She tucks a bay leaf behind each girl's ear. She sprinkles salt beneath their cots. And she places a smooth river pebble into each of their palms. Then she whispers a blessing not found in any temple text. If your dream takes you to water, do not drink. If it takes you to fire, do not speak. If it takes you to someone you do not know, walk backward. Slowly. Even farmers had rituals. Those who worked the land by day feared what walked it at night. Before sleep, they would scatter barley grains in a circle around their bed. Not for nourishment. For containment. It was believed that spirits must count every grain before entering. And by the time they finished counting, the sun would rise. And they would vanish. This charm appears in no epic. But it passed from hand to hand. Farm to farm. Across 1,000 forgotten beds. Do you know what the Greeks feared most at night? Unfinished things. A spindle not wound. A broom leaning the wrong way. A pot unwashed. Because these things, left undone, could invite the curries, spirits of misfortune. Not death. Just bad timing. So every night, the home was set in perfect quiet order. Not out of habit. Out of necessity. They did not want the night to trip over their negligence. The most mysterious ritual was never spoken aloud. Only mimed, before sleep. A gesture called metakinesis. The motion of removal. A person would reach over their shoulder, as if lifting something unseen, and gently toss it toward the door. 3 times. Always 3. It was said this removed the weight of the day. Grudges. Shame. Jealousy. Not destroyed. Just, placed outside for the gods to sort through. As night deepened, and the lamp oil thinned, there was a time when the household felt strangely watched. Not threatened. Just observed. This was the hour of the silent myth. A belief held, but never written. That each family was assigned a shadow companion. Not a spirit. Not a ghost. Something older. It lived in the darkest corner of the house. Moved only when no one looked. And ensured that dreams stayed in the correct mind. If it left, people said, you'd start dreaming things that belonged to others. And that, they believed, was dangerous. You might wake with knowledge you were never meant to hold. And so, slowly, as the hours thinned, and the night lost its teeth, the rituals slowed. The omens stopped. The charms cooled. And the people slept. Not without fear. But within rhythm. Rhythm of gesture. Rhythm of word. Rhythm of deep, slow breath. Not because they wanted control, but because it was the only language the night would accept. The night, in ancient Greece, did not end all at once. It unraveled. Slowly. Softly. Like the threads of a worn wool cloak coming loose along the edges. The lamp still burned, barely. Its flame shrunk to a sleepy curl. And somewhere in the house, a rooster would stir. Not crowing, not yet, just listening. This was the hour before the hour. When dreams retreated like low tide. And the mind floated in a gray sea of not quite sleep. The Greeks did not leap into morning. They returned to it, step by careful step. First, a gesture. The fingers of the right hand touched the lips. Then the brow. Then the threshold of the door. A silent thanks for waking up still oneself. Not changed. Not forgotten. still tethered to the same name. The fire in the hearth is rekindled, not out of need, but out of rhythm. The ashes are not swept yet. That would be impolite. The goddess Hestia, they said, still sleeps beneath them. And to disturb her before she rises on her own would mean a week of cracked pottery and sour wine. So the hearth is stirred gently, as one might wake a child from a pleasant dream. And now, a ritual almost always overlooked. The listening. For just a moment, before the first chore. Before the first word is spoken. The Greeks would listen to their house. Not for voices. Not for spirits. Just, for sound. A breeze through the shutter. The gentle shift of clay against wood. The creak of a basket that holds nothing but olives. If the house groaned too loudly, they would delay their tasks. Because a house that wakes angry is a house that must be soothed. Then came the water. The most important act of the entire day. Not drinking. Not washing. Not boiling for tea. The first water was always poured away. Out the window. Into the earth. With a murmur, for those who came before. It was believed that ancestors drank the morning dew. And the first sip of water belonged to them. Only after this silent offering would one cup be brought in for the living. What of the dreams? The Greeks did not rush to remember them. That would be dangerous. Dreams were like smoke in a sealed jar. You could hold them too long, and they would spoil. Instead, a person would speak aloud a single word to the wall. The first word that came to them upon waking. It might be nonsense. It might be a name. It might be nothing at all. But to speak it aloud was to give the dream a place to exit. To trap a dream inside the chest, they believed, was to make the heart heavy. And hearts that stayed heavy became homes for misfortune. One woman, in a hill village above Delphi, wrote her morning ritual on a clay shard. Before the sun reaches the window, I name the night and release it. I light the wick, sweep the ash, and wash my hands in silence. The day has no power until I say, now. A quiet incantation. A line between worlds. And a reminder that not all rituals had gods in them. Some were stitched into the fingers. Sunrise in Athens was not a grand affair. No trumpets. No blinding glory. Just, a pale light stretching gently over the Acropolis. The birds beginning their gossip. The temples glowing like warm bone. And the people, barefoot on stone, lifting their eyes, only briefly, before returning to the business of bread, and salt, and wool. But even in the noise of day, a trace of night remained behind. A lamp wick still black with memory. A charm still warm from the body it touched. A basin of water, not yet emptied. What happens to rituals when they're forgotten? When no one whispers the name before pouring the wine? When no one ties the protective knot at dusk? Do the old gods fade? Or do they just watch quietly? From doorways no longer swept. From corners no longer bowed to. You may think the Greeks were obsessed with control. That every thread of the day, and every breath of night, had to be folded into ritual. But it was not control they sought. It was conversation. With time. With mystery. With the silence between lamp and flame. Because to live each day without a thread of the sacred was to invite a kind of drought. Not of water, but of meaning. And so now, as the final shadows of Greek night curl inward, as the imagined walls of clay homes dissolve into the quiet of your own room, let us remember them. Not as warriors. Not as poets. Not as philosophers. But as people who feared the dark. Just as much as we do. And who, in that fear, built soft rituals to hold it gently in both hands. Until it, too, fell asleep. And now, as your eyes grow heavy and the echoes of ancient Greece fade into quiet, remember, even in the land of myths and marble, people ended their days with simple gestures. A whisper, a flame, a bowl of water for the unseen. No great epics were written after sunset. Only soft rituals, small fears, and the comfort of repetition. Sleep now, knowing that long before alarms and electric lights, there were those who waited for dreams. Just like you do now. Good night. And thank you for wandering through the forgotten with us. Until next time.